Liz. It's so wonderful to reconnect with you and to catch up on the work that you're doing. How have you been?
I've been doing great. Thank you so much, Patty. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to talk about conversations for change.
We're in quite a unique time, I believe, in our evolution, where we can learn a lot more about our human operating system. And you and I started talking on a previous conversation about self-care and our regulation. And I thought maybe we would start there. With what you're doing in your work, and how all of this ties together.
I appreciate that. And I will tell you that as a functional medicine practitioner, I do an infinite number of amazing tests on people to really uncover where the imbalances are. And over and over and over again, what I see is that stress is at the top of the pyramid, and then that trickles down to causing whatever other imbalances we see. Sometimes that testing can be really helpful for buy-in with people because it's hard for most of us to believe that we're not really getting there when it comes to nervous system regulation. So, self-care is one of those things. Everybody's talking about self-care. A lot of people make it look easy to spend their entire day taking care of themselves. And that's not actually true. So I know when I got burned out and left my hospital job, I thought I was doing all the right things, and it took a long time to really realize that I wasn't doing the things that would serve me and help me become a more regulated person. So a lot of it is just around exploring what actually does the job when it comes to taking that nervous system down a few notches.
So say more about that. For years, it seems like it's been a little bit of an uphill climb to talk about self-care. For many people, self-care sounds indulgent. It sounds like something we just don't do. And I'm embracing as well this term of regulation. How do I show up as a regulated human being instead of a triggered human being? Is someone who is aware of how I show up. How can you share a little bit more about that and your experience with that as a healthcare provider?
Yeah, so I always thought about self-care in terms of getting a massage or going to get my nails done. And that was a little bit easier to do because it was occasional and it made me feel like I was, doing the right thing, taking care of myself. I didn't actually realize that what we need is consistent messages of safety for the nervous system at periodic intervals throughout the whole day. And I was completely missing that. I spent 25 years prioritizing taking care of other people in the hospital setting in one way or another. And I wasn't sending my nervous system those safety signals and didn't even realize how dysregulated I was becoming over time. And it was really shocking to me when I left my job really to pursue my next passion, which was functional medicine, that even though I was teaching people how to do this, I really wasn't doing it myself. And I was still very dysregulated. I was constantly in an internal battle, in a battle with my children, with my ex-husband, with my parents. And I thought all of it was everyone else's fault. And it was a real turning point for me when I realized, no, this is because I need help with this. I need guidance. I've got to really understand what it is that my unique system needs to start taking it down a few notches.
Oh, that's wonderful. Was there a turning point for you when, we've talked about it before, and I know we've taught together and done some corporate teachings together. So you know the verbiage I use, which is below the line, being in our triggered state, or above the line, which essentially is that emotionally regulated state. So, what was that turning point for you of awareness when you understood that you were sort of living below the line in this state of protection mode?
One thing, honestly, was my own biological age test result that came back at 103 years old, even though I was chronologically 45. And when I looked at the big picture, I actually could say I'm exercising, I'm on the right diet, I was working on my sleep, I wasn't quite there. So I only had one other place to look as far as like, what do I actually need to do? I mean, this is dramatic. I'm biologically over 100 years old. What is going on? So I started to dig a little bit deeper and just try to start uncovering the pieces of the puzzle. And I guess through some other practices like meditation and things like that, I started to hear how I was coming across when my kids were coming to me with certain issues, or I would get into conflict. And it was hard to take that look at myself and really go, I actually don't like who I am and how I'm interacting with people I really care about. This is not, it wasn't easy and it wasn't fun, but it gave me hope when I realized that this was all about nervous system regulation. I was riding a line where I had no resilience, so I was ready to crack at any given moment. It took nothing for me to really cross that line and just react in a way that wasn't consistent with my value system. We all have to be able to get into fight or flight as humans to survive, but we also need to be able to get back out of that. And so creating that resilience really allows us to, you talk about being above and below the line. Like if we start to feel ourselves going there, to realize it and cultivate that resilience so we can get back into alignment.
Yeah, just having that awareness of the different state, that state dependent being that we are. We're these state dependent beings where I've often talked about it that when I'm above the line, like I don't have a complaint in the world. But if I get triggered and go below the line, I can find fault with everybody and everything in my world. And so when I realized that that was one of my sort of defining moments of realizing that my world is completely colored by my state of being, and that my only responsibility really is to show up my best for the people in my life.
And I admire you so much for that, Patty. And you've taught so many people about how to really recognize and what to do about it, and how can we cultivate the ability to act from that place that is consistent with how we want to show up. So thank you for the work that you're doing in that realm.
Thank you. It's not easy. I haven't gotten it mastered yet, but there's a path to it where those triggers become treasures and where something happens and we can find that opportunity in it because we'll find whatever lesson needs to be learned if we seek it,
Mm.
which is kind of fun. So tell me a little bit more about a typical client that may come to you. Maybe they've looked for other reasons for how they're feeling. I'd love to hear a couple success stories because I know earlier on I had shared, you had shared with me some of the phenomenal work you're doing, and that's been a couple months. So I'd love to hear where some of your success stories have landed.
Yeah, and a lot of it is around things that women go to the doctor for and get told like everything looks normal, or we actually, don't have a way to do a good assessment of hormones, for example. So, I love serving women. Obviously, I've mentioned that. And, migraines. I had a very young woman come to me with a syndrome that presented as migraines and persistent nausea. She wasn't sure, is this related to my hormones? Is there something going on with my digestive system because of all the profound nausea and vomiting that she would have? It was really limiting her ability to hold a job and to maintain friendships because it was really unpredictable when it would come on. So her doctor told her, I actually think you should seek alternative care for this. And she came to me, and I have a nutrition partner, and that it's an integral piece of the puzzle. But through advanced lab testing, we figured out what was really going on at a deeper level. And we were able to stair step her to complete resolution of that syndrome through diet and lifestyle. So, there was a hormonal component, there was a gut health component, but with standard lab testing, which does have a place, but you really can't uncover what's going on at a deeper level in the body. And stress was playing a big role when it came to all of those things as well.
Congratulations on that. And for her, like that's life changing. How beautiful is that? Yeah. Thank you for the work you're doing. If you have another example, I love to hear success stories. So by all means, this is the place to share your successes.
Yeah, it can be really wonderful for women who, deal with IBS because that's a common one when it comes to kind of hitting the end of the road when it comes to Western medicine. Irritable bowel syndrome is basically a label that means we don't actually know what's wrong with you. Most women have had, tests and scopes, and often the solution for via prescriptions would be an antidepressant, for example, or something to help with the diarrhea or constipation. And it comes with all of the other things, the nervous system dysregulation, the hormonal imbalances. And again, this is all stuff that we can uncover through advanced lab testing. So it's typically in our 16-week programs, people are able to consistently resolve those issues and restore balance in the body, but it's never without the nervous system regulation piece. I really do believe that if that part is not addressed, the same symptoms are going to show up over and over again. It might change a little bit in the way it presents itself, but it's not going to be complete long-term resolution without that piece. So I actually did just bring in another practitioner into my practice to specifically help people with that nervous system piece of the puzzle.
Oh, that's wonderful. And being able to have that awareness and to find that regulated state is beautiful. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the work that you do with women in menopause,
Mm.
because I do believe, for a lot of women, there's been a feeling that we're being put out to pasture. There's no role for us. It's sort of like, now what in my life? And I'm at a place I have shared openly. I turned 60 this year, and I just feel that it's the best possible time to be alive with this stage that I am in my life, with what we know about our minds, with what you know about our bodies, and what we're able to uncover. I'm curious what you have to share for the women who may be listening and are wondering what's next for them.
I'm so glad you asked that question because I see it as an opportunity for complete transformation. There's a lot of discussion around hormone replacement therapy right now, and it is being viewed in many cases as like, this is the solution. This is what everyone needs to go through menopause and be the best version of themselves. And I would actually argue it a little bit. I think hormone replacement therapy has a wonderful place and can do lots of amazing things for women. Not everyone is a candidate for hormone replacement therapy or even wants it. So, what does that mean? That means an even deeper dive into who we are as women and what this next chapter looks like, and getting into even more intimate touch with our own bodies so that we understand what do we actually need to thrive in every aspect of our lives at this stage. And I think you're a great example. You are in such a beautiful chapter. So yeah, average age of menopause is 51. The journey starts long before that. HRT can play a role, but it's not the end all when it comes to really thriving and discovering who we are and what we're capable of as we go through menopause and beyond.
Oh, I love it. And it's perfectly aligned because that's where I'm at. I've been fortunate that I'm not on hormones, I'm not on any medications, that I feel really very much alive. And it's from a lot of the practices you and I teach, that we talk about, that we have uncovered. And I love the work you're doing, and I'm so thankful that we get to have these type of conversations. So, is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up this beautiful segment?
I would just say, I mean, we touched a little bit on healthcare workers and how any and all of this can apply to those types of roles specifically. How do you know when you're reaching the end? Because I really didn't realize it until I was already there. And that's hard to look back on some of the things, the choices that I made in my work life, I would do differently had I been given the tools to really start to regulate my nervous system and realize that I was not where I needed to be. So things like even feeling your own heart rate elevating when you're in conflict, as one example, or like getting into a state of like brain freeze where you're not making decisions as clearly, or you feel like you can't respond appropriately, or notice you're looking back at conversations and saying, like, why did I say that? And so some of the tools are around stimulating the vagus nerve to restore that resilience and get back into our true state of being. And so things like you talk quite a bit about 478 breathing is one tool. Holding ice in our hands or splashing cold water on our faces can be a great way to break that cycle. In terms of like peppering things in throughout the day, gargling will stimulate the vagus nerve. So, we can habit stack when we brush our teeth before and after, just gargling with some water and stimulating that vagus nerve can be really helpful. Legs up the wall is a wonderful tool that I find a lot of clients really enjoy, and it doesn't have to be 20 minutes. We can do this for 3 minutes or 5 minutes and just take that opportunity to relax, get into rest and digest. Being in rest and digest around eating periods is really important. I know as healthcare workers, we tend to get like we're on the clock for 15 minutes or 30 minutes to get a full meal in and then race back to whatever we were doing. For me, it was like sit at my desk and then you've got to go back to the operating room in a really difficult case and start functioning at that level again. So some easy tools around the meal times just to help with gut health would be Stephanie, my nutritionist, always talks about breaths before bites. So just taking like a deep breath or putting your fork down in between bites and really chewing food if you can. I always tried to bring salad. That was the worst choice because it takes so long to chew it. So packing a nourishing leftover meal that's hot and a little bit easier to get down can be really helpful. But just all of these things to just support the body and help the body know that it is safe. And especially for healthcare workers, it's a trauma what we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis, and we tend not to get those types of tools in the workplace setting. So just wanted to add like those few little tidbits. Meditation is not available for everyone at work. So there are lots of like other little things. The breathing practices can happen when no one is even aware of it. Or a couple of essential oils in our hands and just take a quick sniff. I eventually learned to keep a little bottle of essential oils in my scrubs and just like take that moment for a quick inhale and a long exhale. And that was incredibly helpful as well.
And I'm so thankful for that, and that you recognize that and can support other caregivers in the same way. My bigger hope is that as we learn more about neuroscience and our need for regulation and the reality of co-regulation, that we regulate to those others in the room, that we can begin to shift our workplaces into places where we can be at our best more often and not at a critical place of hyper elevated cortisol throughout all days, every day. And so thank you for having this conversation. I think that could be a whole nother time when we could talk about that, because I think for the future of medicine, we need to care for our caregivers in a way that allows them to regulate their nervous systems in a whole new way.
Yeah, it's critical and it's under-recognized. Burnout is a huge issue and it's costing a lot when it comes to the healthcare workers' own lives, patients, and obviously hospital systems.
Well, let's keep this conversation going, because that may be the conversation for change. And how do we support our healthcare workers in an entirely different way? Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Patty. I really appreciate the opportunity.